All that remains of Hiribiya, the village where Saber and Huda Deeb were born in 1940s colonial-era Palestine, are two old Arab buildings in an area that is now an Israeli kibbutz, Zikim. Like two-thirds of Gaza's 2 million Palestinians, they are refugees, and may well remain so until they die. But still they talk of the village as home. I dream of Hiribiya all the time, sometimes even while I am awake. I imagine the places where I used to hang around, said 78-year-old Huda Deeb. Her 76-year-old husband, a retired taxi driver, is no less effusive. Records show that more than 2,000 people lived in Hiribiya before 1945. There were also about 60 Jewish residents who lived in a cluster of houses on the edge of the village, said the father of 11, adding that they would come to his family's farm to buy fruit. Right of return. As a long-running Gaza border protest builds to a climax in the coming days, it is the passing down of memories such as these that fuel the demonstrations. May 14 is the 70th anniversary of the creation of the State of Israel in the Western calendar. The following day is when Palestinians traditionally commemorate the events of 1948 as the Nakba, or catastrophe, when hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were dispossessed. The protest campaign, dubbed the Great March of Return, began on March 30 and has revived a long-standing demand for the right of return of Palestinian refugees to their former towns and villages. Successive Israeli government have ruled out any right of return, fearing the country would lose its Jewish majority. For the young, the right of return is a principle. But for those who can remember pre-1948 Palestine, it is more tangible. The Deebs, who say they have about 200 grandchildren, can see up the coast from Gaza's beach and have visited Hiribiya since 1948, before Israel built the barrier that seals off Gaza from the coastal road north to Ashkelon and Tel Aviv. Saber's first post-war visit was with his sister, shortly after they arrived in Gaza, when they took a donkey ride to fetch vegetables from their old farm. Years later he went back with some of his own children. Border protests. Saber said he watched as convoys of Palestinians filed through Hiribiya, one of the last places to evacuate, en route to Gaza and a new life as refugees. The Israeli plane dropped barrels of explosives, and we used to hide in the vine fields, he said. Now, 70 years later, one of their grandsons has been wounded at border protests. He was among thousands at the tented encampments that have sprung up at the Gaza-Israel frontier. Most of the demonstrators have remained hundreds of yards from the restricted zone near the Israel fence, but some have advanced toward the border to hurl stones, roll burning tires at the fence and launch kites with petrol to set Israeli fields ablaze. More than 40 Palestinians have been killed and hundreds wounded by Israeli troops, with Israel's lethal response drawing international criticism from human rights groups. The Israeli government says it is protecting its borders and that its troops are following rules of engagement. The Deebs, meanwhile, are unwavering in their support. The protests make them, the Israelis, realize there are people demanding their homeland, Huda said.